Hey there, welcome back to the eLearning Champion Pod, where we dive deep into strategies, trends, and triumphs shaping the world of digital learning. In today's episode, we're tackling a challenge many of us face: bridging the learning gap, how to engage a dynamic workforce. And trust me, you won't want to miss the actionable insights and expert perspectives we're about to unpack. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest for this episode, Davon. Davon Miller is the founder of the NAVOD Group, curated to promote lifelong learning experiences and empower professional growth. Davon is a passionate and highly motivated talent development innovator and certified learning and development professional. With over 10 years of experience in the learning and development landscape, she has a proven track record of elevating organizations to new heights through strategic talent development initiatives. That's not all. Davon has successfully cultivated a culture of continuous growth across a wide range of industries, dedicated to nurturing talent and driving organizational success with innovative learning strategies. With a relentless commitment to excellence, she has consistently transformed employee development programs into high impact engines of change. Welcome, Davon. It's a pleasure to have you speak for us today.
Well, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Sherna. I appreciate it. Glad to have you here in this conversation and excited to share some information, additional insight for you guys. So appreciate the invite.
Looking forward to it. So, before we head in, dear listeners, make sure you're a true e learning champion by hitting that follow button wherever you're listening in from. All right, let's get started. So, Devon, can you start by sharing an overview of your background and experience in developing learning content for diverse teams?
Sure. Actually, my experience began initially in the financial space, and so I managed at that time brokerage operations teams, trust operations teams, and I was on a fast track at that time to obtain my law degree and practice securities law at the time. So during that process, learning and development training fell in my lap. I found myself training brokers, investment brokers on margins accounts and securities, sales training, uh, expectations and change management skills as well during that time. So at that moment, I realized how my passion was for curating content and really encouraging employees to be successful. And so I, at that moment, pivoted my career directly towards learning and development. And I actually transitioned to HR and education space just to make sure I focus on leadership skills and developing content for leadership environments, as well as transitioning over to the manufacturing and telecommunication space, where I was able to further my learning and development skill set to develop content for employees within the Chicago location, China. And so in that space, I actually focus more so on product management, on consumer sales, on leadership skills as well. And so further on, fast forward, I was able to transition over to the telecommunication space where managed a learning and development team or training team. And we really supported teams in Hawaii and the Philippines. And so I was able to get a broad perspective of how to design and develop content for diverse teams and diverse workforces. And so that experience really gave me a broad knowledge of that. And sitting back thinking about it now, I know we talk about developing training and how the what, why, and the how is important. The
Yes.
how is absolutely important when you're looking at
Yes.
designing courses for diverse teams. The why and the what is important as well, right? We absolutely need
Yes.
to help our leaders understand and be comfortable with engaging with their employees or managing change management, right? Or
Yes.
a retail team absolutely needs to know how to, sell effectively, sell their products and services effectively with their customers. Or contact center agents need to absolutely know how to deal with objections with their interactions with our customers over the phones, right? So the what is absolutely important, as well
Mm.
as the why,
Yes.
right? The why is
Yes.
certainly important also. We have to make sure that those strategic goals are tied directly to that training and that training content.
Yes.
And we need to help our employees understand why they're taking the course, right? How would that course benefit them in the long run and help them to be a little more productive? So the what and the why is absolutely important. The how is certainly, I think, the most crucial when you're taking a look at building content for
Yes.
diverse teams, right? When we're looking at fluid differences. So I'd like to share a little bit more about that and help you all understand some of the techniques and things that I utilize throughout the process to really hone in on and engage our diverse teams across the board.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. And change management is my favorite topic. Yes. So you worked with teams across various employment levels from entry level to C-suite. So, how do you tailor your training content to meet the needs of such a wide range of learners?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Sherna. And meeting the needs of all levels, it can be a little challenging,
Mhm.
very challenging at times because you have different skill sets and competencies, right? So it's
Absolutely.
important to identify the competency levels or skill sets in the very beginning, even prior to the development stage. And so one of the things that I do is leverage pre-assessments. Those could be formal surveys or actual focus groups, right? To
Right.
make sure I get to the bottom of and understand what those specific needs are, those specific skill sets are, so that
Right.
I can actually accommodate and each of those individuals throughout the training. So I also have continue conversations with management
Mm.
and also with learners.
Right.
So those continued conversations unveil those identified learning gaps. We actually talk through key performance indicators that we want to look at to measure success
Right.
across the board, and also identify those strategic goals, which is crucial when we're looking at designing courses. Obviously, we want to make sure the learning initiatives are actually meeting the needs of the organization holistically, right?
Right.
So those surveys and those continued conversations help me to understand, what the perspective is, what the goal is across the board in terms of developing content. Now, ideally, we have situations where I break out those specific levels and roles in different sessions, right, to make sure that I tailor the course specifically towards that role. So we
Right.
may have your beginner level, your intermediate level, or
Mm.
your advanced levels, right? So
Right.
ideally that's typically what's conducive for training in those spaces to tailor the courses, right? But there are situations where that's just not possible. I remember working with some time ago with a consumer sales line of business,
Right.
and they had some availability constraints, employee availability constraints, and time constraints. They were
Right.
allowed 4 hours per month to train out, to be
Oh.
away from their roles, to continue to complete training. So there were
Okay.
some constraints there. But in that case, I have to be very adaptable, have to be very creative to be able to accommodate those learners. So
Right.
um, in those situations, I look at focusing on the core content as a
Right.
group in a synchronous learning environment where we break off into different sessions to accommodate that with additional engaging role-based learning e-learnings or
Right.
open discussion sessions right after that session there. So there's ways to be creative in those situations, but again, I have to be very creative, very adaptable in those scenarios. Now, there are situations where just having everyone this similar skill levels in the same class
Right.
is the only option, right? That may be the only option, right? Depending upon the line of business and the structure of the business, right? So In those cases, I make sure that I include engaging elements as much as possible. Your knowledge
Right.
checks, your gamification activities, your
Right.
open
Yes.
discussions, reference material so that agents and employees can reference that material after the training session. So I know that's not an ideal situation, but I have found that there is some advantage to having different levels of learners in one class. It opens up the opportunity for open discussions around best practices and
Right.
different perspectives, right?
Different
So,
perspectives. Yes.
right, and so it does, help the efficiency of training, learning and engage in that enhancement in their activities and in their development skills. So I found that it's been pretty beneficial when you have that a mixture of levels in one session. Again, not always ideal, but there are some
Yes.
benefits to that.
Right. Yes. The different perspectives are really beneficial. So, Devon, which strategies do you use to address the fluid differences within a dynamic workforce, such as, you just mentioned different generations, there might be interests and languages, even different time zones and geographic locations.
Yes, and that takes a little bit of a strategy there when you have those fluid differences involved. And I often refer to this as conscious content creation
Okay.
because you're actually being mindful around your audience. You're taking
Right.
into account exactly who your audience is, what those characteristics are, and I usually consider the unknown and known fluid differences. And your known fluid
Okay.
differences are things such as your geographic differencesgeographic
Right.
locations, differences in culture and languages, time zones, right? Your
Yes.
unknown fluid differences are typically your generational differences, your different interests and learning styles. So it's important
Correct.
to keep those things in mind when you're designing content. And this ties back to the what, why, and how. Um, when you're really
Yes.
taking into consideration those fluid differences, it's how do we ensure that all learners are being fully engaged, right? You have a lot of things during the development stage. There's so many things as a instructional designer, so many elements going through our minds, right? It is okay. Do they have what types of generational differences will we have in the class? Who will be in specific to general geographic locations, different geographical locations? Where are they located? What are their cultures and backgrounds?
Right.
Do they have? Are they in different time zones? So those things we have to consider when designing appropriate and engaging courses there.
Of course.
But
Yes.
when it comes to connecting and accommodating those known fluid differences, we absolutely have to be accessible. We have to make sure
Right.
that our training is flexible, and we absolutely have to make sure the training is relatable, right?
Right.
So in terms of it being accessible, for me, I typically make sure that the course is mobile friendly
Right.
and accessible in all areas so that anyone in different locations can actually access that content.
Right.
I offer micro learning modules to just accommodate everyone's schedule. And I also provide downloadable resources so that everyone has the access to that information at any time. So it absolutely has to be accessible. The other thing too is that it has to be flexible. There has to be a flexibility there.
Right.
Yeah, I know, and previously supporting teams in Hawaii and the Philippines are on a quite a different time schedule, right? Time zone.
Yes.
So Hawaii is 6 hours ahead of us, and the Philippines is 12 hours
Well,
ahead of us.
yes.
Uh, so there's quite a bit of a difference there in their time zones there. So I absolutely have to make sure that I allow for on-demand access
Yes.
for any participant to actually take the course at any time. So that's really important there. And the last piece here is in terms of being relatable. It's important, particularly for when you have different cultures and backgrounds attending and completing the course. it's important to study their culture. I know that seems like a large feat because, gosh, how can I know everything about this culture prior to
Exactly.
training? And it's not really, you don't have to know every last thing about the culture, right? It can mean those very small things that you're
Mhm.
honing in on. I can give an example around training out our employees in Hawaii. And they have a really strong culture in what they call the aloha spirit, and
Okay.
which is really grounded upon yeah, emphasis on kindness and compassion and mutual
Wow.
respect. And so I had to anchor that in team building training sessions, sales training, and leadership training, and particularly customer experience
Right.
trainings there to make sure that we incorporate that, the foundations of Aloha Spirit in the training. So they could
The
really relate
training.
to that,
Great. Yes.
relate to those concepts. So small things like that can be incorporated. Another example is, I know Hawaii and the Philippines, they're very big on food and culinary
Food. Yes.
aspects there. So just recognizing or mentioning poke or sisig or balut, which is pretty common delicacies in Hawaii and the Philippines. They can absolutely relate to that, and it just creates a light, relatable moment in certain circumstances there. So, again, just making sure that the content is relatable for those that are participating, just makes the training a lot more conducive.
Yes.
Um, and so that's really on the side of looking at the known fluid differences, but there's
Right.
also your unknown fluid differences, right? And so these are things that may not be readily available to us, or a little difficult to unveil or obtain, right? These are
Yes.
those generational differences, those differences in interests and learning styles. And so one of the things that I try to incorporate in training is sort of the collaborative learning experiences where we have role play activities. We have include gamifications or leaderboards and quizzes, so making sure that the course is engaging in that aspect really touches on their learning styles, because sometimes you don't know what their learning styles are, right? But it's important
Yes.
to go into the development stage with the mindset that you will have a wide range of learning styles in the class. You will have a
Right.
wide range of different interests, right? And so taking those things into account, you're pretty successful at making sure you incorporate those elements in training. The other thing too, which is really important, is making sure that flexible learning paths are offered, right? So again, I
Yes.
mentioned
Yes.
micro learning opportunities or self-paced modules are really important in that space. And also the blended learning opportunity. So offering different avenues for agents and employees to participate and complete the training, whether it's an in-class session, an e-learning module, or breaking off into a mentorship discussion or open forums for those particular participants,
Right.
um, are really helpful to make sure those training sessions are very, very engaging. So one last thing I wanted to mention also is around making sure that you incorporate generational engagement.
Right.
And so that actually meets the needs of the numerous generations that may be a part attending or completing that course. As we all know that our Gen Zs and millennials are pretty tech savvy
Yes.
and feedback driven. So
Yes.
want to make sure I include gamification elements and micro learning elements into those sessions. Our baby boomers are pretty familiar with structured content,
Right.
and clear instructions. So including those elements as well, and in terms of our Gen Xers, they're pretty independent, right, and
Right.
self-reliant learners. So definitely want to make sure we integrate self-paced learning opportunities and practical application activities in that case. So again, really making sure that we connect with all learners, looking at our
All learners.
unknown fluid differences is important. So just keeping those things in mind here will make that course a lot more fluid and reach all the learners in that class there.
Right. Interesting. Really interesting set of strategies. So after strategies, now how do you incorporate diverse perspectives into your training content, considering such varying skill sets and backgrounds?
Yes, so that's a great question, Sherna. And I actually refer back to that conscious content creation, right?
Right.
And it's something that I actually reach out to our subject matter experts or incorporate subject matter experts into the session. They're very valuable from the very start of the development stage to the very end of the reinforcement stage of training. And so they offer different perspectives and different best practices into the course. And it validates that course to a certain extent for learners because they know that they have an expert in the class. We
Right.
have to be as instructors, as the facilitators, as the designers, we absolutely need to be pretty much an expert ourselves. We're
Yes.
learning the process. We're learning the particular content of the training course to actually be able to relay that out to our employees. But at the same time, such subject matter experts are typically involved in the day to day. And so they
Right.
understand exactly what scenarios, specific scenarios to bring to the table to make
Correct.
sure they unveil those best practices with those participants. It's also important to include mentor-led discussions where those
And
employees have the
yes.
opportunity to meet with professionals. And so these
Right.
sorts of mentors may attend the class or they may actually have interactions prior to those in-class virtual or e-learning sessions to have further discussions around solidifying that content and making sure that the content is reinforced.
Right.
So it's also important to ensure that content is free from any biases or stereotypes, right? Cultural biases. And
Mm.
so
Yes.
considering those differences, again, a lot of times there's those unknown differences, but at the same time, we absolutely want to make sure that there are no stereotypes embedded in the
Right.
class. The worst thing we want to do is put off some of the participants or
Correct.
uh, some of the participants and to really unfortunately that will actually discourage them from actually attending the class or completing the course itself.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the last thing in terms of diverse perspectives is sort of utilizing AI analytics. And I know AI is becoming more and more the platform and platform and use nowadays here, which
Yes.
is very useful. But it really gives some great information in terms of understanding the preferences, particularly in different regions. So, say for instance, I submitted a survey and a local survey out to a group in Hawaii or the Philippines, or they've taken a specific course, and I received specific feedback from them from that specific region on how satisfied they were with that particular course and specific things that we may need to change on that course. And
Right.
so those are some of the things that results that we get back from those surveys to understand how do we need to update or adjust the training material to make sure the course is more efficient and beneficial for that specific region of employees that are taking that course. So very important in addressing those diverse perspectives.
Yes. Yes. Interesting. Right. So you emphasize the importance of knowing your audience. Could you walk us through your process for how should we understand the needs, preferences, and pain points of our learners?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think to fully understand our learners, it goes back to having continued communications with management and learners themselves.
Learners, yes.
Um, Absolutely. Having those open conversations. Initially, with the conversations with management, it is finding out exactly how we want to impact behavior. What pain points or challenges are our agents, our employees having, are they facing? And
Yes.
what specific KPIs do we want to identify to impact? So those conversations are very important in the very beginning of the development stage. It's also important to talk when I found that it's very beneficial to speak with learners as well. I at times create focus groups to particularly understand some of their preferences, and
Correct.
here's where we can actually unveil some of those unknown fluid differences, right? Not all the time, but there may be some cases where we can reveal some of those unknown fluid differences where typically we wouldn't have, observed those or received those initially with conversations with management. In a
Right.
lot of cases, our agents are pretty comfortable and employees are pretty comfortable with having conversations with the training team, right? More open with having those conversations. So some of that information is very beneficial and it helps during that development stage. So again, it's important to identify those KPIs, identify pain points, and have those continued conversations with management and learners across the board to be effective.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. You mentioned ensuring content is relevant and role specific. So, could you give us an example of how you applied this principle in a real world training scenario?
Right. So I can name a number of those, mention a number of situations, but one that really sticks out in my mind is that situation where I supported consumer sales for a telecommunications company.
Yes.
And I was responsible for rolling out a sales training program that was based on the spin sales model,
Okay.
particularly geared towards our SMB retail and contact center agents. So the spin sales model is really focused on consultative sales approaches, and it helps our
Okay.
agents and employees to really enhance their skills on having conversations with sales conversations with customers. It helps them to sharpen their ability to understand and solve customer problems. And it really helps them to really sharpen their ability to sell the value of products and services as opposed to pushing the features and hard selling, right? So that was a premise around the sales training, but for each of those lines of businesses, the premise was pretty much the same, primarily the same, but because the roles were very different, I had to tweak the training program to meet those needs across the board. So for
Right.
example, with the SMB team, they primarily interacted with customers in person, directly with their small business managers, right, or small business owners.
Got it.
And these were the example, your small insurance companies or small tire companies or your barbershops or your hair salons, right? So
Right.
I had to specifically tailor those courses for that group, primarily around their challenges, which was um, interacting with customers in terms of their concerns. Customers had concerns around security issues or bandwidth issues. And so I had to include simulation activities that addressed those security issues and concerns that customers had in those small businesses. So that approach allowed them to really enhance their ability to ask probing questions and their ability to identify specific products, appropriate products for customers across the board
Right.
based on customers' needs. So tailoring the course in that essence, in that aspect, really helped that group to be successful in the long run. And then when you look at the customer service or customer or contact center agents on the other end there, they interacted with their customers pretty primarily via phone. And so
Yes. Got it.
they had challenges with dealing with objections and
Right.
selling products and understanding selling the value of our products versus the features of our products. And so
Right.
it was important for me to include interactive activities, role play activities, and simulation elements there, which would incorporate their ability to practically exercise how to handle objections based on this specific objection that they had that they were faced with. How do they successfully interact or counteract that? And so I had specific scenarios around those objections and
Right.
specific best practices, for example, where they had to match in the e-learning courses, they were matching those objections
Mm.
to those appropriate counteractions, right? So those specific activities, again, really help them to exercise, you know, specific examples and specific activities, perform
Right.
specific activities in that sense to make sure they were prepared for interacting with their customers in the
Mm.
long run.
Right. Interesting. So, okay. So, Devon, how do you leverage blended learning approaches to engage learners and promote knowledge retention?
Yes, so that's really important there, Sherna. Just blended learning opportunities, again, allows us to really focus on um, engaging all learners and
Yes.
having multiple delivery modalities of training content is important. I remember rolling out a systems product training, where I actually offered in-class training sessions, virtual sessions, as well as supplemental e-learning courses, online weekly knowledge management updates, which were our agents or employees were able to access content directly on the knowledge management tool to be up to speed with updates on products and services. And also initiated email flashes along with that for specific alerts that went out on a daily basis. So offering those multiple delivery methods is truly important to make sure our employees are really up to speed with updates,
Right.
and we're actually combating that sort of counteracting the forgetful curve, right? You know, studies have shown that we forget about 50% of content within an hour of reviewing new concepts and new information. And you know, within 24 hours, we tend to forget about 70%
Right.
of that information. So we have to find a way of counteracting that forgetful or forgetting curve in that
Yes.
essence. So consistently introducing information in different ways, excuse me, in different ways can actually decline that and reactivate memory, that muscle memory for those that are participating in the session. So that approach really helps. Multiple modalities of delivery helps our employees to sort of remember and retain the information along the way.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Um, what types of engaging and interactive content have you found to be the most effective in training programs?
Yeah, so I think in essence, all of our components, all elements are important, right?
Right.
But I think the most impactful for me has been the involvement of role play activities and subject matter
Yes.
expert
Yes.
initiations there. Role play activities, again, allows participants that opportunity to really apply their new concepts in
Yes.
the real world environment. You know, it's giving them that active learning environment where they're practicing, they're reading, they're watching, they're, you know, engaging in decision making at the time while they're learning that
Right.
process or concepts, right? And so it's also giving them that safe space to make mistakes
Make
and get
mistakes.
feedback. And
Absolutely.
that's what we want in the training session, training environment. It's an opportunity to make mistakes, receive feedback, and be, you know, efficient by the time they complete the course to be able to be sufficient in the real world.
Right.
Um, it also boosts engagement, right? So
Yes.
really giving them those interactive activities just sort of breaks up that monotony a bit. I know there are some monotonous content when you're looking at IT or other content that sort of can be a little monotonous. This sort of breaks up that monotony and
Right.
gives them other activities and involvement that they participate in just to make sure the training is actually satisfactory and they're satisfied in the training. Um, And lastly here, it really gives them an opportunity to get that feedback, immediate reflection and feedback.
Immediate, yes.
Yes. So, and that's important to complete the course and follow through with that specific process and make some mistakes at the very end of that training session. Not so conducive, right? Granted, there are some employees that continue training and that do make mistakes, right? Human error sometimes is involved there, but we want, it's important to reduce that number of errors that they make after the completion of the course. And so incorporating those role play activities and engaging activities will reduce that the number of errors that participants will make after completion. So those are very, very important in terms of role playing. The other element here also that I feel that's really impactful is our subject matter expert participation. And as I mentioned earlier, their participation is very crucial from the start of training development to the very end. And it's really in terms of making sure they're involved in the training session themselves. I particularly invite them to attend the training, if it is an in-class training session or virtual session, right?
Yes.
If I'm creating a session, an e-learning development course, I will often video record their expertise and include that recording in the e-learning course, right? So it's crucial to have that expertise, and it really validates the material, and it helps learners to feel more connected to the material because they feel, you know what, this individual is a part of this specific team, and I know that they're in the day-to-day, and I know they're pretty experienced in terms of dealing with specific scenarios. So it validates that their expertise, and it validates the importance of the training itself. So it's very crucial to have those subject matter experts in training sessions.
Right, absolutely. So, Davon, how do you ensure accessibility and inclusivity in your training programs, particularly for learners with disabilities or language barriers?
Yeah, so this is crucial also, and this falls into the category of those unknown fluid differences, because in a lot of cases, we don't know if there are any disabilities, particularly now where we have many of our courses that are virtual, and we have e-learning courses that we initiate. But again, we have to take these things into account. So there's a number of things that can be incorporated in training. And it is one particularly is making sure that all courses are audio and have audio and visual content. So if you've got learners that are visually impaired, they actually have visibility to the course themselves. So it's very, very important to make sure that all videos include closed captions, and we want to make sure we benefit those that are hearing impaired also, and including those closed captions and transcripts. Okay, so those are really important. I often also consider time constraints, making sure that I extend the duration of the class for those that may not be able to complete the course as quickly as others. So I open that opportunity up for those that are particularly have disabilities in that area. Again, this is something that management has actually reached out to me beforehand so that I can extend that course for those individuals. So being very flexible in that case to make sure we accommodate those with disabilities is really important. I know we speak a little bit about making sure that we've got content in the course that's actually, color. There's color contrast included in the course, or specific fonts that are included. And I pay close attention to that also. There are specific fonts and colors that we may want to be really selective in choosing in terms of making sure that those that have disabilities can actually view the course.
Right.
I know there's specific colors that we should typically use, your blue and orange combinations and your blue and red combinations and blue and brown combinations are those colors that we should actually take into account when developing content, e-learning content, or any training content for those with any colorblind impurities
Okay.
or
Right.
disabilities. So that's really important also. But all in all, it's again going back to those unknown fluid differences. We
Right.
have to connect to that and be open to those differences and making sure that we incorporate all aspects in the training to accommodate that.
Right. Okay. So, can you discuss the importance of leveraging data and encouraging feedback in training programs? And maybe add how you've implemented these strategies in your own work.
Well, I think this is very, very crucial. Collecting data should be one of the reasons why we have the training. It actually validates that training course.
I agree.
It encourages improvement. This is how we confirm that training was successful or not
Yes.
so successful, right? There may
Yes.
be situations where we, satisfaction scores are not so high, and so we make those adjustments to the training to
Right.
um, ensure that it's more efficient the next go round. So it really validates the training across the board here. Uh, in terms of my experience with data collection is that it's been really important for me to connect with the organization's data analysts or having access to a data reporting myself. I've typically had access to Power BI or
Right.
SAP business objects or ClickSense to make sure that I have access, readily access to that content or to that reporting to measure success, to build in specific benchmarks and understand how that training has actually impacted the organization overall. I can share that for a previous sales training program that I rolled out, one of the KPIs that we looked at was, overall a business's core sales and value added sales. And so that data became very, very important in terms of ensuring that sales programs were effective in that
Right.
sense. So yeah, so overall, data collecting is a very essential piece of completing the training process. It validates training. The ultimate goal here is to show how learning programs impact organizations, and
Yes.
continued captured data and feedback promotes training effectiveness. It promotes inclusivity. It promotes continuous improvement, right?
Yes.
This information confirms that learning objectives are met, and it drives content improvement and personalization. It encourages high performance, and it, ultimately, organizations growth. So this is really the icing on the cake here. It's one thing that really excites me is that when I go through the whole process of the development stage and rolling out the program, and when we look to see what those KPIs look like and how the training has actually moved the needle in terms of performance, it's exciting to see that there's growth and development based on that training. So that's what really keeps me going and moving here with training.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. We've covered so much ground today, from fluid differences to conscious content creation and so many engagement strategies, and even real world scenario examples from you. It's really interesting to hear. And this brings us to the end of this insightful episode of the eLearning Champion Pod. And I have so much to take away from this episode, Devon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherna. It's been a pleasure to be here again. Thanks for inviting me, and you have enjoyed the rest of the day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a lovely day ahead. So I hope you're walking away with some fresh ideas and actionable steps to engage your learners If you found value in today's conversation, please do share this episode with your fellow e-learning enthusiasts who could benefit from these episodes. Let's spread the knowledge and empower more champions in our field. What are your thoughts on today's topics? What challenges are you facing? Please do write to us on our available channels. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in to the e-learning champion pod.